All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I am your host, Quan. I go by Q, of course. And on this episode of Mediocre Dads, I have guests, I should say, not just a guest, I have guests. And I'm excited because, they are parents themselves, but they also have this program that I think that you guys will love and be able to take from and learn a little bit about and kind of do your own research into it, of course. But I think they have this program in which it started with martial arts, but then it turned into most parents just want the discipline that comes with the martial arts. And don't worry, we're going to get into it. It might sound cryptic, but it's going to make sense towards the end when we bring it all together and throughout our conversation. But enough me. Let me introduce my guests, right? So I have Matt and Audra, and they're here, and they have this program called
Yeah,
Karama.
Karam.
Karam.
Yep.
It's a tricky
Little
one, yeah.
leaders.
Little
See,
leader.
look, forgive me, guys. Terrible names, great with faces, though, right?
Yeah, I
But
get
they
it.
have this program, and I won't go here and tell you everything about it. I'm gonna allow them to do it. So, without further ado, please, Matt, Audra, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your Little Leaders program.
Q, thank you for having us on. We appreciate that. I guess what I'd like to start with is we have 4 children and 3 boys and a girl. Ours are a little bit older. I think our daughter now is 25, right? And so, when you're a dad, there's a lot of things that go through your mind at the different stages, and when I was younger, I was working hard to make a living and I was doing the dad thing, worried about, can I keep food on the table, right? Am I doing what I should be doing with my kids? And did I go to the basketball game this time? And, and all those kind of things, and so, but, when I look back now as a dad, one of the things I noticed that I really did work on, not knowingly, but we did, was creating the legacy in our children. Okay. And so, the martial arts brings a lot of things to a head, if you will. It really teaches you discipline and it teaches you respect, of people and property, right? It teaches you teamwork and many of those things that we want for our children that help elevate them in their later years in life to be successful and maybe to have a family of their own potentially at one time. And so what we'd like to do is share with you guys, our parents in our martial arts school wanted that black belt behavior at home, but without kicking and punching. And so when COVID hit, we pivoted. We took the things that I would say in front of class as an instructor, or my wife would say to the parents, and we took those messages and we tried to put it in a fun way that the kids would enjoy it. Okay. And so we had our students actually vote on characters. So in our little videos that teach the lessons, there's a zebra and there's a toucan and there's an alligator. And the fun guy that the kids like is this cranky cockroach. And he's the nemesis. Of course, he does stuff he's not supposed to do. He gets in trouble, And, when I was being raised, my dad had a strong hand, you were going to do it his way. And now, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about things, and so for us, we tried to take those character skills and put them in a duplicatable program. And that's what we did in our martial arts school. And so the parents wanted the kids to, I'd say 90% of our parents brought their children to learn character and to learn leadership and to develop into young adults at an early age so that they could be successful. And that's really what the parents wanted for their children when they came. And so we did that. I've had the good fortune over 30 years of teaching I've taught thousands of children, and I love children, period. They're all of them, right? They'll open their heart to you. They'll try so hard for you. And they'll kill themselves, so to speak, if they know you care about them. And that's the important part. You really have to give them your time. You really have to give them your heart. And when they know you care, they'll understand the rest, and so I can give you an example. We had a little guy, he was in 6th grade, and the middle school principal called me and said, Matt, both his parents are in jail. He's being raised by grandma. And if I don't straighten him out, he's already the biggest bully in the school. If I expel him, I'm worried he's going to end up at the DH. It's not going to go good. Can you help him? And I told him, I said, thank you for calling. I don't know. But yes, we'll try. And I have to tell you, it took me 2 weeks with him,
Wow.
and he, number one, had to get him to understand that I cared about him, and I wanted him to do well in life. The second thing that I did was I set some clear rules and boundaries for him, and I have to tell you, he didn't like that. He was used to just running by the seat of his pants and getting to do what he wanted because grandma couldn't enforce it, if you know what I mean, And so at that point, I did have to knock him down a couple times, I didn't hurt him, but just to get him to pay attention, and get him to realize that, that I care about you, but you do have to do what you're supposed to do, and after 2 weeks, he became the poster child for the school. And
that's so awesome.
Yeah. If kids were acting up on the playground, he straightened them up. And if kids weren't acting right in the classroom or listening to the teacher, he'd get on them for the teacher, And so, but he was just a young boy that didn't have any parents, and he didn't think anybody cared about him, And it breaks your heart when you hear about it, because everybody in this world has a right to feel cared about, and I think that's so important. And as a dad, I want to be that leader, right? I want to be the one that steps forward and says, hey, we're going to have some ethics in this house. We're going to have some morals in this house. We're going to have some values in this house, and we're going to work on those together, And so I'm very proud now of how my 4 children are as adults. They're kind people. They will help anybody. They're respectful of everybody. And to me, that's the measure I want for my child growing up, right? I want them to help everybody and encourage and be a light that shines from in front, not from behind, right?
Yeah.
And so what we did is we took our curriculum and we have these what are called different monthly learning units. So the first month we work on courtesy and saying please and thank you and doing those basic things. When I was being raised, if I didn't tell my mom thank you or my dad please or those things, he let me know I was supposed to do that. And I see now that some of the kids today don't do those things. Our program is in a developmentally delayed school in Ohio. And so one of the first grader teachers came to us and said, out of the 25 kids in my class, not one were ever taught to say please or thank you.
Wow. We're seeing a big gap in traditional values of being lost, and it depends where you are in the States, obviously. But that's really exciting about our program is that we bring back those traditional values, and sometimes I think parents are overwhelmed and confused nowadays and not sure what direction to go. And so what about ours is it's so strong in those traditional values and in creating successful kids to be successful leaders someday. We're intentional about it.
And being dad, I would always say, my job is to be your dad, not to be your friend.
100% agree.
Right? As they get older, once they crest 18, that's a different story, right? Now it's okay. Now we can be friends, right? Now we can do things together and that. But when you're younger, as dad, it's my job to instill those values and those morals, or school's not going to teach them to you, right? There's no teachers.
And we do it in a fun, easy way. And that's through the animated characters. Our program is really designed for 3 through about 7, 8, 9 years old, depending on your specific child. But it's fun. The videos are very engaging and they're short and it doesn't take much time. And that's the thing, so many parents want to be good parents, right? We all set out to be a good parent. Nobody says they want to be a mediocre parent, right?
Right.
That's a point of your whole thing is to aspire. We can be determined to be more. And I think the way our program works is we just pull out critical life skills that are so helpful in helping these children kind of elevate themselves, and maybe things that parents haven't thought of, like, oh, that's a really important thing we need to teach them. And if you're not intentional about thinking about it, then it gets missed. And all of a sudden, the children, we've lost that time that we can spend to help them, and they're growing up and we're like, oh, shoot, we should have taught them. Like, I have a friend I walk with regularly, and she didn't institute any type of chores or responsibility in her home. And she's like, oh, they're spoiled rotten now, and we want our children to be successful and thrive. And that's really what we want to make sure we're offering and providing everybody, to just have that opportunity. If you want to, make your child be happy and successful and well adjusted, then we might have something that can help you.
So I guess I would say, okay, there's three things that I'd like to share with dads, okay, that they may have not thought of, right? I know when I was younger, Audra's degree is in child life. So I was in martial arts. So it was a good marriage between the two skill sets to develop something is a program that would work, okay? But so the first thing I want dads to understand or realize that I didn't know when I was a younger dad is that there is a limited learning window with children. And that, according to the study at Brown University, they studied 50,000 families, okay, over a 20-year period. And they realized that the habits that children have are rooted by the age of 9.
Oh, wow.
Right? Once
That's
you
not
hear
a
it,
long
you're like,
time. My daughter's about almost 6. It's 3 more years I got to make sure we're
know.
good.
That's for real, right? That's for, yeah.
That's what we generally hear. People are like, oh my gosh. And you think you can do it, but it's so much easier, right? That 0 to age 7, 8, 9 is when they're like a sponge. They want to learn. They want you to kind of help craft and mold and, not make them a mini me. We don't want that, but to help them, figure out the habits and the skill sets that can help them thrive later.
So I guess the easiest way to equate that is if you, as a parent, have a child that you want to be an Olympic gymnast, if you listen to people, like when I was a child, Mary Lou Retton was the best girl, now it was Simone Biles, right?
Yep.
She was incredible, right? Phenomenal. But do you realize they start as a gymnast between the age of 3 and 4?
Yes. And
Yeah.
and a lot of people, it's like, that's past. Like your kids are like, say 10 or 12, and they're like, oh yeah, they're just starting. And it's like, I'm
Forget
not
about
going to
it.
say you're too late, but like, let them enjoy it while they're in school. But then realistic dreams are going to need to set in, and maybe a lawyer's in their best interest.
Exactly.
Well said. Yeah.
So that's the first thing is, we know in other areas, like to be an Olympic gymnast, you got to start early, right? And if you don't, like you said, if at 9 or 10, it's not going to happen.
You're behind
right?
the wheel, right? You're too late.
You're too
behind the
late,
curve,
And then the second thing that we've learned that I want to share with dads is there's a gentleman, his name is Dr. James Comer, okay? And he is currently at the Yale Medical School as the assistant dean. He's been there 45 years, and he also runs the child psychology department at Yale University. Very intelligent man, right? And he said, I don't understand. I was an aspiring child. I had a lot of kids I went to school with that were the same. My parents were great. Those kids had great parents as well. But what happened after I got out of college? Some went this way, some went this way. And he's like, why? I couldn't figure it out. And he said, with all the education and training I had, it really never came to appear until I put some effort in it. And what he ended up saying was, he believes the whole difference was his parents were intentional about teaching his children in their family about character and leadership. And those other kids that were great kids and the other parents that were great parents didn't do it. And in his mind, that's the only difference, was the parents that took intentional effort to teach those skills at a young age so that they could mold themselves into who they wanted to become later in life. And those other parents didn't do it.
I think
Okay.
it's
So
so important because you even mentioned, right, like kids up to 9, they're like sponges. That's when they're soaking everything in, right? And so
oh,
when you're teaching, oh, well, like almost teaching intention, it's not you're sitting down with you saying, hey, this is the definition of intention, and this
Right.
is how we're going to
right.
teach you to be intentional with everything you do, right? And how I care, right?
Right.
It's little things that I think that accumulate, and then turn into big thing, and then when it happens in their life, they're like, I don't know how or when, but I already know this. I've learned this. I know
Yes.
how. I know what I know what I know what right looks like. I know what respect looks like. I know what being loyal or having
Honest.
integrity looks like. But I was
Good.
never like, no one sat me down and said, this is what integrity is, and you must know and do all these things to be an integral to have a person considered of integrity. Right? I think
See?
it's through the small things that we teach, and the intention part, kind of going to the intention part, that is where it comes from our parents. It's where your kid does
Well
something,
said.
and
It
we're
does.
not disciplining the kid because we're angry at the kid. We're disciplining because we want to correct the action. And when you're correcting,
Yes.
when you do it right, when disciplined and done correctly, you're disciplining
Yes.
the act, you're correcting the action. They're also learning something. And when they learn
Yeah.
that, they're like, oh man, I didn't, it may not take effect right now when you're doing it,
Yes.
but then 5 to 10 years from now, they're like, oh, I know that I'm not supposed, this is not a kind thing to do. So I'm not going to do
Right.
this. So
That's a great point, Hugh, and you hit it right on the head. And when we discipline with love is kind of a phrase that I like to use. You can't go wrong. It's not about punishment, right? Punishment sometimes is a consequence, but when parents sometimes are young and you're trying to figure it out, you're like, I don't want to do it like my parents did it. Or maybe you do, maybe it was well, but sometimes we often hear stories that it didn't go well. And so when you discipline with love and you incorporate that it's coming from your heart to help them be better, you can't go wrong. I mean,
yeah,
on any facet. But yeah, introducing it. And you're right. You don't sit down and have that conversation so specifically.
It's your
It's
actions.
it's that opportunity of learning that happens there, and then they're what, modeling us. We know that too. They're modeling our behavior, and what they see, they give right back to you. So if
yeah,
sometimes that reflection's painful,
yes,
but sometimes it's so valuable. So yeah, through what we're sharing here today, it's about looking at that and learning and doing what you need to do. It may not be through us, but I think these
Yeah.
3 secrets that Matt's sharing, and we'll recap them at the end. But it's just so valuable.
yeah,
And you can tell that I'm the oldest of 6, okay, kids. And my mom loved us. So did my dad, don't get me wrong, but in a different way, right? My mom, she was up before we got up. We had clean clothes. She made us food. I knew when we got home, there'd be a cookie around, and I knew she loved us, right? And it seems like in talking with you, you were raised in a similar way,
yeah,
or maybe not. That your mom made an effort to know to share with you. Here's what it means to be kind.
yeah,
Here's what it means. And you understand the difference. And like you said, it wasn't she had to sit you down and do it, right? But she taught it to you through her actions, right? And so that's a phenomenal mom in my mind,
yeah, yeah,
right? That's one that loved you, cared about you, took the time to teach you. Only the ones that care and love you will discipline you, will
yeah.
teach you, right? It's
It
the
was,
ones that are indifferent that,
yeah, no, because it was crazy. So, so I was adopted. I have a twin brother, and we were
okay,
adopted, and
okay,
so we were, fortunate to be adopted, and so we were adopted by a white family. I say that not to bring up race, but it's an important part of who I am and
it
why I am,
it
right?
is
And
what it
so,
is. Yeah, yeah,
and
right,
so we grew up culturally. There was some differences in how we grew up. However,
sure.
my parents they made a very specific effort to show that intention, and
Wow.
we were punished, right? Like it's not to say just because
Yeah,
they adopted us and they became our parents, they couldn't have punished us. They did punish us.
yeah,
There were
yes,
punishments, and we saw a lot through those punishments. But what we saw a lot of was was in the end, my dad would always tell us after, after it was all said and done, he would sit us down and he'd say, hey, he goes, just know that I do love you. It's not, I don't do this because I'm angry with you, or there's some hidden agenda behind me, say I'm spanking you because you did this or whatever the case, or sending you to your room, or you're being grounded for this thing, whatever case, or taking something from you. It's not because I want to, to show you that I'm the boss, I'm superior to you. It's to show you that, hey, I built a foundation, and I expect things from you. I've set that on that foundation. There are standards, and within those, if you don't meet those standards, there's consequences. And I tell people all the time, even my soldiers, I say there's consequences to everything you do, negative or positive. So just because you did something good, there's a consequence. It's just this consequence happen to be a good consequence, right? You got a promotion, you got a pay raise, or whatever the case might be, right? And even you just relate that to kids. And so my parents were very, very very intentional, and it always was, hey, don't forget that at the end of the day, we love you. We'll do anything for you. But in order for us to know, to know that for you to be successful, this is going to be rough. This time might be rough, because if you're not going to listen, well, then we're going to have a rough time together, up until you're 18, 19 years old, because when you go out into the world, you're going to see that the world is not as loving and caring as we are in this home. And it's not, so hey, that was my life. I know that's not everybody's. I was very fortunate, very blessed to be adopted at such a young age, and then have a family that cares about us and to ensure to take care of us and show us, instill those standards. And my dad was phenomenal, because the biggest thing that my dad taught me was respect. And it wasn't, I remember there were a few times where, he would get angry and he would raise his voice, right? But then he would always recognize that. You can almost see it in his eyes. He'd recognize it, and he would kind of take a deep breath, and he'd come back and he'd say, hey, okay, this is what you did what was wrong. This is when I was older, but he was like, this is what you did was wrong, and this is why it's wrong. When he goes, when I'm sitting in a cockpit, because he flies for Southwest, he goes, when I'm sitting in a cockpit with a co-pilot, right? And say they do something wrong, and in that case, that could be putting people's lives at risk, right? Yeah. So he's like, I can't sit here and just yell at them like they're children, or yell at them because I'm their boss and it's my responsibility. He goes, I have to find a way in which they're going to receive what I said was incorrect. And he goes, you do that. He goes, I do that with you guys. And he explained a lot of this when I became older and when I had my first daughter, and he was explaining to me kind of what punishment looks like. And so again, like I said in the beginning, it was, I saw it. I didn't know where I couldn't put my finger on it, or where I learned it, but I knew I learned it. I knew what it looks like. I knew what it was when I go talk to somebody and say, hey, excuse me, sorry to interrupt what you're doing, but I'm looking for this, and this. Can you tell me where that is? And that simple being kind and respectful, that person immediately, most people that I've interacted with were like, oh yeah, hey, how you doing? Matter of fact, let me take you over there myself. Yeah, clearly busy, but let me take you over there myself. Let me help you, ask about your day. But that simple act of kindness then wanted them to be like, man, this person's very nice to me, very kind, and they recognize they're doing something. They were still kind about their approach, and I have a willingness more to help them.
Yeah, see, that's incredible. I'd have to say that's a blessing. I mean, that's a gift, right? That they were able to impart those values to you. You knew you were loved, and today that's what these kids need. They need to understand there are boundaries, right?
Yes.
They need to understand that they're loved, and it's you'd be shocked. Kids are kids. It doesn't matter, right? They just want to be loved. And I loved it in the martial arts classes because we got to do physical things too, at that time, and get some of that energy out, right? Because sometimes I know as a boy, when I was younger, I was full of it, you know?
Yes.
If I could, Q, I think I want to add to, I don't know if everybody heard it, but the way your dad delivered the message. So, like I said, if you discipline with love, you can't go wrong. And it's all about the tone in which it's delivered, right? If any of us are spoken to, we get the tone, we pick up on that, and eye contact, and maybe getting down to your child's level. And so that you're not, dominating over them. Those are all some important things to learn and remember as a dad, because you can be very intimidating as a male, especially, with your two daughters. A male to any child can be quite daunting sometimes. And that presence is important. And so, just making sure that, you discipline with love, I think, is a critical piece too.
I guess I'd like to share a story with you. That was a pivoting point for me as being a dad. Okay. When my dad had our martial arts school, it was very militant, right? And you hollered all the time. You weren't allowed to ask a question. It was strict. And so I had my sons in the martial arts class. They all started when they were 5 years old. I would holler at them like my dad hollered at me. They would cry. And I'm like, get tougher. What are you doing? And all this. Well, it wasn't until my daughter, the fourth one, she's 5 years old, she's in class, and I hollered at her like I did the boys. And she started to cry. And it broke my heart.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, what adult male would holler at a little girl so much to make her cry? I had to change.
It's crazy because if you saw another grown man yelling at your daughter that way, you would be like, I'm going to put you on the ground and you're probably not going to get back up. And
we're going to talk, right?
Yeah. We're going to have a talk that only adults have, we're learning something in this class, but I'm the instructor. I'm going to show you what I've learned in this, what I'm teaching in this class, it's crazy. So, I would tell people all the time that, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And so when me and my wife were, or I guess, ready to have kids, if you will, we, in our heads, we said we want 2 boys and then we're going to be done. Right. And so that's it. Well, the Lord works in mysterious ways and I have 2 daughters. And so one thing that, I've been taught with having 2 daughters is similar to you is, I'm active duty Army. So the yelling, the drill sergeants being in your face, telling you what to do, and you keep moving, right? Like I took part of that with me in the beginning. It wasn't until that I'm seeing my older daughter, especially, I'm saying something and I'm standing over like, hey, you're gonna do A, B, and C. This is how you're gonna do it. Do it to standard. Right. And she's just in tears, breaking down, and I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What have I done? Like, why am I doing this? And so now I recognize that my older, she's sensitive. And it's not to say it's a bad thing, but she is. And so now I have to adapt in what I do. So a lot of times I've gotten down, I get down on her level. Another thing that I learned from my dad that I didn't pick up on until I became an adult was looking at people in the eye when they're talking to you. Because my dad would do it all the time. And so now with my daughter, I look at her in the eye all the time, even though she may not be wanting to look at me. I'm looking at her and I'm talking to her, trying to get her to understand why what she did wasn't right, but how she could tweak it and then it'd be okay, and why, and whatever the case might be. But I recognized that myself in the beginning, like the first 2 years, I'm just over here like a drill sergeant at work, and then a drill sergeant at home, and it wasn't working, and I had to change it and had to fix it, especially because I don't like seeing my daughter cry, and I would sit there and I'd go to bed and I'd be like, gosh, I'm failing, I'm sucking.
It breaks your heart.
Like, why am I doing this?
Why would
God
I
gave
do
me 2
that?
daughters to do that. So now when I have sons, it's going to be totally different.
Yes. No. And that's, I always I laugh, man plans and God laughs, right? That's our thoughts, and to me, those pivot points, I later learned, if I had to hire an instructor, if they didn't have children, I couldn't let them teach children. Okay. Until you have them, until you raise them, you don't understand and you don't relate how you need to change. Right. And so, one of our instructors, of course, came from the Marine Corps, and he was a drill instructor there, never married. He has more weights in his house than the YMCA does. Right. And for an adult male teacher, he's awesome. Right. But for a 6-year-old girl, he is not the
No.
right guy, right?
No.
Can't relate, can't understand, and
he-
he's
he
not a
doesn't-
dad.
Yeah, and
you
and he
know?
doesn't have I wouldn't say interests, but he like you you have the desire, the interest now because you're like, oh, that didn't work, and this is my
Right.
baby,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And you want to help them, and you never ever want to hurt them, and it's hard to figure out sometimes, I think, but reflection and making that shift, and sometimes the woman in your life can help you recognize that, like, that's not how we're going to do that here, and so
Yes. My wife is
well
very
done,
good at
Dad.
reminding me,
Can-
hey, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
She goes, would you talk to me that way? And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, all right, you're right. My bad."
Good for you though.
Well, dude, that's huge. That growth that you had there is impressive. So
Yeah.
congratulations on doing that. Not only recognizing it, but trying to take a different approach. And that's,
Thank you.
I think, as a dad, that's all our job is to find out what resonates with our children. How can we get them up that leadership mountain, right? And give them character. And because like my daughter now, I always tell her, I can't always be there.
Yeah.
You're at an age now where, I hope I taught you right, because,
Yeah.
I can't be there all the time.
Yeah. And we've all made mistakes, and us as well. We don't like to
Yeah.
admit it.
Yes.
That we've all made mistakes in that parenting journey, and that leads into what Matt's going to share for our third kind of secret that we want your dads to know is, you make mistakes, but you can learn from people who have been there before you, and that's what we feel we can offer because we're in our 50s now and we've done this and we see the errors in some of our ways. And how we parented was different than how we ran the martial arts school because,
Right.
they weren't your children. And so we learned from all of that. And, teaching that leadership it's been amazing. And every child who went through our program, the parents were just so thankful, and they would come into our school and they're like, I want my kids to be like your kids. And because they were very polite and,
Respectful.
and respectful and
Teamwork.
and appreciative. And so at first I was like, thanks for saying that. How nice of you. But after a while I kept hearing it and I'm like, I think there's something here. And so that helped blossom the program and have confidence in what we were doing and knowing that it's right and it's true and it's good.
Mhm.
And the positive. So I guess the third thing as a dad that I think is important to think about or just pay attention to, that at the time I was doing it, but I didn't know I was doing it, if you will, is if you want to, let's say I said, Q, your goal this next year is to climb Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you have to do to be successful?
Training. There would be a lot of training that would need to go into that. Also, mentally preparing for when things get hard. So yes, because things are going to get hard when you're climbing Mount Everest. So yeah.
Yeah. And so the first thing you need is an experienced guide.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sorry, I went totally different route, but yes, experience guide.
No,
yes.
No, you're spot on.
It's like,
You're spot on.
I need to go find out who's done this before, so it's like you start preparing. You're like, I'm not going to get there. So then you would get there.
I need the mental discipline, right? Yeah. I need a food regimen. I need a workout routine that I can follow. I need 6 months or a year to prepare, right? I mean, all those things go through our head on that kind of a goal, right? And that's the same here with children. If you want your child to become a leader, if you want them to have character, right? Do those kind of things, then find somebody that's done it for other people and can lead them up that hill without falling through those cracks, right? Yeah. And so that's the important part is you want to find an experienced guide. If we were taking on Mount Everest, to be realistic, if you didn't have a good guide, your chance of succeeding is very low, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's, we, like when I talked about Mary Lou Retton, her coach was everything. Her coach got her to that platform. Her coach instilled all of that into her. And so without that, there's phenomenal kids with phenomenal talent that because they don't have a good coach, they don't get there, right? Mm-hmm. They don't get that opportunity. And it's no fault of theirs. It's just they didn't have the right coach. And so for us, when we want to teach those values, that character and those leadership skills, we do it we do it on purpose. We do it intentionally, and we have experience at doing it. Okay. And so I'll give you just another concept. If we want our children to learn, in 1964, National Training Laboratories created what was called a retention pyramid. And they said, okay, if we teach our kids this way, they're going to learn the most and retain the most. So the first is audio-visual. If you show them what you want to do and they can see it, that gives them about 20% retention.
Mm-hmm.
After they see it, if you discuss it with them, stacking those, that takes the child's retention to about 50%. Lastly, if you have them do it with you, their retention goes to 75%. So if you want a behavior to become a habit, a positive habit for your children, show them, discuss it, and then have them practice it. It's a simple formula, right? Think about you're driving a car, right? Or thinking about you hired a new employee, right? You wouldn't hire somebody, let's say that you need somebody as a receptionist to answer the desk, right? You wouldn't take them, just put them in there and say, go at it, right? First, you'd have them mentor or shadow. Then you'd teach them the script you want them to say. Then you would watch them do it. You would evaluate them. You'd help them with their performance. Then when they get it all under their belt and they're doing it well, then you can let them do it on their own, right?
Yeah.
It's the same with the children, with the babies, right? Any young ones, you want to, there was a dad that we knew that said, they came to class. There was some strife in the household. He asked his daughter to clean her room. She didn't do it to his satisfaction. So there were consequences. Mom was upset because mom's like, wait a minute. You didn't tell her what you wanted. You didn't show her what you wanted to clean her room. She doesn't know how to do it. And so why are you mad? You didn't do any of those things, And so she can't read your mind, And the mom was right, but dad was still not happy.
Yeah.
And so the bottom line, our program is very simple. We have you once a week watch a video with the kids together. We give you 3 questions so that dads can have that dialogue with the kids. Then we say, okay, if it's please and thank you, then for that week, they practice saying please and thank you. They practice making their bed. I love, who's the admiral that wrote that book, Make Your Bed? Do you know him?
I remember. I know you're talking about. I can't think of the name.
The name escapes me. Phenomenal, right?
That's a good read for any of your parents or your dad. Yeah, it's a good read.
One of the things we had our kids do was make their beds. You wouldn't believe how many parents gave me pushback. Well, they shouldn't have to do that. Until that book came out. When that book came out, then it was okay.
Yeah. And I want to interject here too. And, we say our program starts at 3. And so if we were like, how does a 3-year-old make a bed? Well, okay. So it's not about a perfect bed. It's about teaching them the steps. So they pull the blanket up, they put the pillow up there. It's not the same level a 7-year-old would do. Right. Mm-hmm. But if we don't start when they're little, then it's not going to be achieved, because just like that dad experience, he sent her in, clean your room. She'd never done it before. She didn't know how to, she could give her best effort, but a lot of times it's not explained or shown, and these kids need that.
When you said that, immediately I was teaching my daughter how to tie her shoes. And I remember, I'm sitting there, I'm like, no, you need to make an X. And I was like, and she's obviously not getting, she knows what an X looks like, right? But she's like, I'm not understanding it. So I have my shoes, she has her shoes, and I'm walking through step by step, right? And we went through the thing, like you said, I showed her how to do it. And then I explained to her what I was doing and how I was doing it. And the little part, one of the hardest parts, right, is finishing the 2 loops, right? And then in the end, I was like, hey, look, just go ahead and try to practice. And it was amazing because she got the concept. She understood the concept, right? Now there's a little, she didn't completely tie her shoe, but I can tell you right now, she pulled the 2 loops together apart, and she's like, Dad, I tied my shoe. And I was like, you know what? You did. That is, I showed you, you did it. Yes. And I was freaking awesome. And I'm so proud of you. I was like, now it's just, we just practice that, right? I was like, no worries. It's like, it's not meant for you to get it right now. I was like, in about 3 or 4 months though, I was like, you'll know how to tie your shoes, and you're going to show your sister how to tie her shoes. And so it's immediately what I thought of when he said that. I was like, it's simple. It was just showing our kids how to do it. And I will say to comment on making the bed in the military. it's stress to us in basic training making our beds, and the reason it's stress for us to making the bed is because it's not just it's cleanliness, but two, it's to say, hey, this is my first accomplishment of the day and I did it well. And so now I can go and start my day feeling accomplished, and now everything other I think I do next from this point on, I have that confidence to say, hey, I may not know exactly how to do it, but I'm going to try it and put my best foot forward. And if I fail, I recognize where I failed at and I'll correct it and I'll fix it next time.
So. And promised in the military, someone came along and told you if you weren't doing it right and showed you how to do it right. Yeah.
If you didn't do your hospital quarters correctly, oh my goodness. It's real quick. I'm sorry. My daughter made a joke. She, because my wife was making her bed, and she goes, Dad, you don't know how to make a bed. Only mom knows how to make the bed. Oh. And I was like, and my wife starts laughing and she goes, sweetie, no, Dad actually knows how to make this bed better than either of us,
right?
But she's like, I don't think you want that. You wouldn't be able to sleep in the bed. It's just something you look at. Right. Don't touch it. Don't touch the bed. It's there. It's you're leaving it there. Don't touch it. I made it perfect, right? It was funny because she said that, and I was like, in my head, I'm like, actually, I know a lot about it. You know what a hospital corner is? Let me see your hand.
Exactly.
Bounce that nickel off
exactly. Oh, man.
Awesome. And that's, those are the families, we work with families like you that maybe been through the military and high performing professionals, because we don't,
understand.
We take good kids and make them great kids. We're not a reform, plan. It's, we need parents that are invested and want better for their children, and know that it takes a little bit to get where you want to go, because any attorney, a lawyer, accountant, architect, CEO, you had to put in the time. You didn't just show up one day and they said, let's make you that person, right? And it's through the discipline and the commitment and the little bit of work you have to put in to kind of get there. So this is what we kind of bring to the table to say, let's really focus on those skill sets and help you out. So go ahead. Let's recap the 3 things before we let them go. We want to respect your time, and we appreciate having us on cue. But
Thank you. So if you could just recognize, I guess, number 1, that before the age of 9, those behaviors or rooted habits, make sure you do positive ones. Number 2, try to be intentional about teaching those character and leadership skills. They're not going to learn them through osmosis. Do them. Not like you said, you don't have to sit them down and teach them that in a way, but you have to show it to them just by what you're doing, because they'll emulate you. And number 3, find those people that will be able to be leaders for your children, positive peers, positive mentors, and put them in an environment where they can succeed, right?
Yes.
And so by doing those things, and then when you want them to learn something, show them, discuss it, and have them practice it.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much.
We'd love to share with your group. We're going to send you over some discount coupon codes, and awesome. It'll be in so they can go ahead and put those in there, because we want to reward your listeners if they would like to partake. They can get a special price on it. So.
Awesome. Our website is blackbeltbruce.com. Okay. And he's just an alligator with the martial arts theme, which is cute. The kids love the characters. And any questions, we'd love to talk definitely. To any parent.
Hey, so Mediocre Dad's team. So all of their stuff will be in the description below. So don't worry. All of these things will be in the description. You'll be able to find them, be able to get more information if this is something you're interested in. Audra, Matt, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your stories, your experiences, and especially your program that's meant for parents who can help, make their kids better. And there's no shame in saying to making your kids better. I promise, because you want them to be the best as they can be. So when they're adults, they're freaking awesome, right? Exactly. But hey guys, without further ado, that's all I got. Thank you for joining us. Being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse to be mediocre. Mediocre Dad's out.
Exactly.